The Queen passes away and everyone cries genocide and colonialism. The video essay. Colonialism. According to Britannica.com, the definition and history of colonialism is as follows. The age of modern colonialism began about 1500 following the European discoveries of a sea route around Africa's southern coast in 1488 and of America in 1492. With these events, sea power shifted from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic and to the emerging nation states of Portugal, Spain, the Dutch Republic, France, and England. By discovery, conquest, and settlement, these nations expanded and colonized throughout the world, spreading European institutions and culture. This has nothing to do with Queen Elizabeth II. She did not invent colonialism, and in fact, as the longest reigning monarch, from the point of her coronation becoming queen until her passing, she was queen regnant of 32 sovereign states. From 1983 to 1987, there were 18 countries that were part of the Commonwealth. There are those who are celebrating her passing because they believe she is a malevolent dictator. I suppose they have no idea that her role is a ceremonial one and not one of authority she can actually execute. Some of the misdirected hatred sent her way is for issues involving Palestine versus Israel. Elizabeth's birth year, a baby still in the womb or just newly born, of 1926 brought about the Balfour Declaration. This was named after Arthur Balfour, as was the famous 1917 letter on the future of Palestine. This is a landmark statement acknowledging the independence of the white dominions in relation to Britain, bound only by their attachment to the crown. What does all this mean? It means there is a public statement issued by the British government in the year of 1917. The Queen was not yet born, and during the First World War they announced support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people. A topic that divides many people, one that I once held strongly also, but have since become more of a centrist on the issue as well, as I am well aware of the wrongs committed on both sides, as well as the valid arguments on both sides. Regardless, Queen Elizabeth II has no role or involvement with this event in history, and so anyone using it as a way to celebrate her demise is savagely uneducated. How many countries that were colonized or considered countries under British rule have ceased their relationship with the British Empire? In 1987, Fiji became a republic. In 1992, Mauritius became a republic. And more recently, in 2021, Barbados became a republic. Prince Charles was even there to lend his support as they celebrated the occasion. For someone who is an evil colonialist, she sure seemed okay with the dissolvement of the countries that were once united under the Commonwealth. The attitude of a malevolent colonialist would not willingly permit these countries to break from the Commonwealth so respectfully. In the extremely leftist publication of CNN, it states the following: Kenya, which had been under British rule since 1895, was named an official colony in 1920 and remained that way until it won independence in 1963. Among the worst atrocities under British rule occurred during the Mau Mau uprising, which started in 1952, the year Queen Elizabeth took the throne. I'm not really sure how many times I can make clear that the Queen has no real power and that her role is a symbolic one. The crimes committed against Kenya should not have taken place. Likewise, the crimes that occurred in the Middle East are ones that get me, particularly the Shah of Iran. Iran was a country that was modernizing and entering the modern age, and it was one of the fastest growing economies in the 70s, and suddenly America and the UK team up, causing it to plummet and reach abysmal economic lows that affected the entire country and had the Shah exiled from his own country with the introduction of a regime of extremism to enter a once peaceful Islamic country. Few seem to realize, but the slow demise of this country should be blamed on the West. People are very quick, especially minority groups, to cry victim regarding the perils of what the British Kingdom did in the past, and why not? They did a lot of wrongdoing, and remembering it is a worthy exercise. I'm not here as an advocate of the British Empire, nor am I defending their evils. I will always be infuriated by the wrongs of the British government. Note, I stated the term government. But in this scenario, I wish to analyze the current publications that seem to think Queen Elizabeth II was the problem. She was not. Her role as queen is not one of authority. If it was, she would have utilized it by now. She would have removed Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister of Canada. She would have stepped in as Australia dealt with the strictest human rights violation lockdowns known worldwide, and she would have abided by her Christian faith more and kept marriage between male and female. The Queen was a believer in Jesus Christ, and if true, her actual reign, if she had a position of authority, would have been quite different.
Jesus Christ lived obscurely for most of his life and never travelled far. He was maligned and rejected by many, though he had done no wrong. And yet billions of people now follow his teaching and find in him the guiding light for their lives. I am one of them because Christ's example helps me see the value of doing small things with great love.
Renowned Christian author J.I. Packer said, "The Queen is a Christian lady resolved to live out her vow till she drops. She merits unbounded admiration from us all. As myself a Christian, a Commonwealth citizen, and an oldest old with my own lifetime commitment to God, I aim to follow her example of unflagging faithfulness."
Those who are angry at the wrongs that have occurred by the British government, as well as wrongs that took place under the reign of the Queen, be angry. Make videos, write assessments on the topic, but have your facts as accurate as possible before claiming falsehoods. Over her entire reign, she was the head of 32 countries in total. 17 of those decided to cut ties at some point after becoming independent. They were Barbados, 1966 to 2021, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, 1952-1972, Fiji, 1970-1987, the Gambia, 1965 to 1970, Ghana, 1957 to 1960, Guyana, 1966 to 1970, Kenya, 1963 to 1964, Malawi, 1964 to 1966, Malta, 1964 to 1974, Mauritius, 1968 to 1992, Nigeria, 1960 to 1963, Pakistan, 1952 to 1956, Sierra Leone, 1961 to 1971, South Africa, 1952 to 1961, Tanganyika, 1961 to 1962, Trinidad and Tobago, 1962 to 1976, Uganda, 1962 to 1963. One should also realize that whilst I can state blatantly how wrong the acts of Western imperialism have been, countries like Africa committed evil acts on their own people as well as raiding in Britain from the 10th century onwards, and this includes a majority of Europe. Before continuing on, please note that I am furious about what took place in Iran when Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi reigned. It is truly infuriating, and I mentioned this again to verify that unlike those complaining unnecessarily about colonialism, Western imperialism, etc., I actually have the capacity to be impartial, and I actually understand the role the Queen, unlike the uneducated morons complaining, has. On the 27th of August in 1817, Britain and the Netherlands attempted to end slavery of white Europeans by Omar Aga, the Day of Algiers. This is known as the Bombardment of Algiers. There was an operation in order by several European navies, as well as the American Navy, to suppress the piracy taking place against Europeans by the North African Barbary states. The goal was to free the Christian slaves who were stolen for profit under Islamic rule, and to end the practice of slavery towards Europeans altogether. To this end, it had a measure of success, as the Day of Algiers freed around 3,000 Christian European slaves following the bombardment and signed treaty against the slavery of Europeans. Sadly, this practice did not end completely until the French conquest of Algeria. France had to conquer an entire nation to end the practice of the evil act of slavery. The horrors committed by Western imperialism, colonialism, is sometimes a defense to atrocities already taking place. These are things people seem to overlook, and sometimes wrongs are committed by both sides simply because assholes exist. In the comments section of Dave Rubin's video regarding The View host Sunny Hostin about the Queen, I stumbled across this interesting comment. The Swedes and Danish also took British people to Africa to sell. The British Empire was a response to that, and what a fantastic response it was. We ended slavery worldwide, including our allies, including the Islamic Empire, who were almost as strong as the British. I'm so proud to be British. Under the Commonwealth, were the countries that removed themselves from being a British protectorate better off under the Queen or better off now? Let us analyse this to make an accurate assessment. Here are 3 countries I've chosen at random. Malawi. The independent growth of indigenous governments and improved economic systems was severely disturbed by the development of the slave trade in the 18th century and by the arrival of foreign intruders in the late 19th century. The slave trade in Malawi increased dramatically between 1790 and 1860 because of the growing demand for slaves on Africa's east coast. Under British colonialism. Under the colonial regime, roads and railways were built, and the cultivation of cash crops by European settlers was introduced. On the other hand, the colonial administration did little to enhance the welfare of the African majority because the commitment of these interests of European settlers. It failed to develop African agriculture, and many able-bodied men migrated to neighbouring countries to seek employment. Mauritius. Independence of British rule Mauritius. Since independence from Britain in 1968, Mauritius has developed from a low-income, agriculture-based economy to a high-income, diversified economy. Based on tourism, textiles, sugar, and financial services, the economic history of Mauritius since independence has been called the Mauritian Miracle. And the success of Africa. Roma, 1992, Frankel, 2010, Stiglitz, 2011. Under British colonialism, Mauritius. The British administration with Robert Townsend Farquhar, excuse my pronunciation, as the first governor, brought about rapid social and economic changes. One of the most important was the abolition of slavery on the 1st of February 1835. Around 3,000 Franco-Mauritian planters received their share of British government's compensation of £20 million sterling for the liberation of about 20,000 slaves who had been imported from Africa and Madagascar during the French occupation. Nigeria before colonial rule. In the 16th century, Europeans traded goods with the people along the coast. Coastal trade with Europeans marked the beginnings of the Atlantic slave trade. During this time, Nigeria had the largest slave trading posts in West Africa in the era of the transatlantic slave trade. Those who were enslaved and taken to these ports were captured in raids and wars. Typically, the captives were taken back to the conqueror's territory as forced labor. Slave labor was utilized extensively, particularly in agriculture. By the time of its breakup in 1903 into various European colonies, the Sokoto Caliphate was one of the largest pre-colonial African states. Under British colonialism, in 1807, it became a legal imperative to outlaw the transatlantic slave trade. Also, a desire for political and social stability was an economic imperative. European powers supported the extensive cultivation of agricultural products. The rescued slaves were taken to Freetown, a colony in West Africa originally established by Lieutenant John Clarkson for the resettlement of slaves freed by Britain in North America after the American Revolutionary War. The common denominator here I am noticing is an end to slavery. Have you noticed the same thing? If so, can you admit this is one good thing that came from British rule? So, if we had to conduct an accurate assessment of whether these countries were better off before British rule, during British rule, or after British rule, we can see that this is positive and negative in different ways, but an end to slavery is definitely a net win for all these countries. One could assume Singapore and Hong Kong should be used as prime examples of excellence after British rule, as well as India, but what I wanted was to demonstrate 3 countries at random that happened to be improved by British influence, and since that time, the United States, as well as the Soviet Union, aka Russia, have done a lot of unnecessary meddling. The Queen was not a perfect person. But why are there so many mourning her? Are they just misguided, or is it that they have no idea what the evils of Queen Elizabeth II actually are? I completely acknowledge that there could very well be circumstances I am unaware of. Queen Elizabeth was never supposed to be a queen. Her father, the former King of England, the 6th of England, was a reluctant king, but unlike one American crybaby, King George VI put duty and honor and country before his own sentiments and took the crown until he died, at which his daughter took the crown at 21 years of age. Royalty today is not bound by ultimate authority to reign a kingdom, but ultimate servitude to the people, being bound by honor as well as God and country, with the perks of being rich. A comment I discovered about the Queen, written by a Sudanese Muslim, reads as follows: "As a Sudanese and someone who lived in a country where it faced the repercussions of the imperialism of the United Kingdom," not the Queen, the United Kingdom, "to this day, when I heard about the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, it touched me deeply. I know Her Majesty came in a challenging era and dark times, and even so, she ended the British imperialism and kept a bridge of relationships between Britain and the ex-colonies, and I know for sure, if it was up to her, she would refuse all these horrendous actions that were made by the UK, but it's what it is, and although we can't change history, most definitely we can learn from it. She was beloved, and still will be remembered. The dead can't defend themselves, and we should respect her soul." How beautiful. The Queen was a loving daughter, sister, then mother, wife, grandmother, and great-grandmother. Additionally, she was a loyal, dutiful queen, a hard worker, a professing Christian, and at times even a defender of the underdog. Before closing, I am privy to the theories about the Queen being reptilian and the fact that she died in 2017 and whoever took over was a clone, as well as the fact that her sudden death at 96 was a murder. I do not need people to tell me, well, actually, you're not something pilled enough because you don't realize that this and that. I just don't even know how to entertain those conspiracy theories. Now, those of us who are a part of the Commonwealth will face the first King of England in almost 70-odd years. Despite my rantings about the Queen's power being purely symbolic, the same clearly goes for our new King Charles III, but what is concerning is the company he keeps, the sadistic pedophilic world elitists he is acquainted with. So let me end this video essay on this quote. "The British Empire had many faults, but it's important to remember that wherever it went, including North Africa, it elevated the standard of living, fostered the rule of law, and inculcated generic Christian truth. Alternatively, many of the decolonization movements of the 20th century, particularly in Africa, created murderous, dictatorial, Marxist, or nationalist regimes, leaving horror in their wake. If you must choose between the British Empire and revolutionary decolonization, choose the Brits every time." P. Andrew Sandlin. Rest in peace, Your Majesty.